Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most significant and heartbreaking conflicts of our time, the Russo-Ukrainian War. As I'm recording this on March 7th, 2025, this war has been raging in some form for over a decade, with its most devastating chapter unfolding since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. What began as a regional power struggle has spiraled into the deadliest war Europe has seen since World War II, reshaping borders, displacing millions, and sending shockwaves through the global order. So, where do things stand right now? What's happening on the ground, and what does it mean for the future? Let's break it all down. For those who might need a refresher, or if you're new to this story, let us start with how we got here. The roots of this conflict stretch back to 2014, when Ukraine was rocked by a wave of protests known as the Revolution of Dignity. Ukrainian citizens took to the streets to demand closer ties with Europe and an end to corruption under their pro-Russian president, Viktor Yanukovych. When he fled the country, Russia saw an opportunity, or maybe a threat. Within weeks, Russian forces, wearing uniforms without insignia, seized Crimea, a strategic peninsula in southern Ukraine. Moscow claimed it was protecting Russian-speaking residents, but the move was widely condemned as an illegal annexation. At the same time, in Ukraine's eastern Donbass region, pro-Russian separatists, backed by Moscow, declared independence, sparking a war that simmered for 8 years. Naval clashes, cyber attacks, and sporadic fighting became the norm. But nothing could prepare the world for what came next. On February 24, 2022, everything changed. Russian President Vladimir Putin appeared on television, announcing what he called a special military operation to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine, terms that baffled analysts and enraged Ukrainians. Within hours, Russian tanks rolled across the border, missiles rained down on cities like Kyiv and Kharkiv, and troops stormed toward the capital. Putin's plan seemed clear: topple Ukraine's government, install a puppet regime, and stop the country's drift toward NATO and the European Union. But Ukraine didn't back down. Civilians took up arms, soldiers dug in, and President Volodymyr Zelensky emerged as a defiant leader, rallying his people in the world with the now iconic words, "I need ammunition, not a ride." 3 years later, this war has become a grinding, brutal struggle, one that's far from over. So, what's the situation as of March 2025? Let's start with the front lines. After more than 100 days of fighting, Russia controls roughly 20% of Ukraine's territory, including Crimea, parts of the Donbass, and swathes of the south and east. But don't let that number fool you. These gains have come at an astronomical cost. In the early months of 2022, Russia's blitz toward Kyiv failed spectacularly, forcing a retreat from the north. Ukraine's counteroffensives later that year reclaimed cities like Kherson and pushed Russian forces back in the northeast. Since then, the war has settled into a bloody stalemate along a 600-mile front, with neither side able to deliver a knockout blow. Trenches, drones, and artillery have turned places like Bakhmut and Avdiivka into names synonymous with destruction. Just this past winter, reports suggest both sides have been digging in, preparing for what could be another grueling season of combat. The human toll is almost impossible to grasp. Tens of thousands of civilians have been killed, though exact numbers are hard to pin down amid the chaos. Soldiers on both sides have suffered staggering losses, with estimates of Russian casualties alone climbing into the hundreds of thousands. Ukraine doesn't release its own figures, but the scars are visible in every village and city. Over 16 million people have been displaced at some point, some fleeing abroad, others crowding into safer parts of western Ukraine like Lviv. Mariupol, once a thriving port city, is now a ghost town after a months-long siege in 2022, left it in ruins. And it's not just the fighting. Russian forces have been accused of war crimes, from targeting civilians to abducting Ukrainian children. Allegations the Kremlin denies, but that investigators around the world are working to document. What about the bigger picture? This war isn't just Ukraine versus Russia. It's a global chess game. Western nations, led by the United States and NATO allies, have poured billions into Ukraine's defense. Tanks, missiles, fighter jets, you name it. Ukraine's gotten it, though often after heated debates about escalation. Just last year, in 2024, we saw the first Ukrainian strikes on Russian soil using Western-supplied weapons, a major shift that had Moscow fuming. Sanctions have crippled parts of Russia's economy, but the Kremlin's adapted, leaning on allies like China, Iran, and North Korea for support. Drones from Tehran, ammo from Pyongyang. Russia's war machine keeps churning, even as its soldiers face morale issues and desertions back home. And then there's the wild card, Ukraine's pushback beyond its borders. By mid-2024, Ukrainian forces launched a daring incursion into Russia's Kursk region, holding ground for weeks and proving they could take the fight to Putin's doorstep. It was a bold move. Some called it a game changer, others a risky distraction. Either way, it showed Ukraine's not just playing defense anymore. Meanwhile, Russia's been hammering Ukraine's energy grid, leaving millions in the cold as winter bites. Both sides are weaponizing technology too. Drones and cyber attacks are as common as bullets, with everything from power stations to propaganda channels in the crosshairs. So, where does this leave us in March 2025? The truth is, nobody knows how this ends. Peace talks have popped up now and then, most recently in late 2024, but they've gone nowhere fast. Putin demands Ukraine cede all occupied territory and abandon NATO ambitions. Zelensky insists on full withdrawal and reparations. Neither side's blinking, and the war, yes, settling into what experts call a frozen conflict vibe, except there is nothing frozen about the daily shelling. Some analysts warn Russia's gearing up for a new offensive this spring, pointing to troop buildups near Kharkiv. Others say Ukraine's Western backers might push for a bigger escalation if losses mount. One thing's clear, the stakes are sky high, not just for these two nations, but for the world watching. Let's talk about the people caught in the middle. Imagine living this nightmare. Air raid sirens at night, schools turned into shelters, loved ones drafted or gone forever. Ukrainians have shown resilience that's hard to overstate. From volunteers stitching camouflage nets to farmers towing away Russian tanks with tractors. But the strain's showing. War fatigue is real, and so is the economic collapse. Ukraine's GDP took a nosedive in 2022 and hasn't fully recovered. Russia's not faring much better. Sanctions, brain drain, and a war economy are hollowing out what was once a global power. Putin's grip seems tight, but cracks are forming, with protests and draft dodgers making headlines. What's next? That's the million-dollar question. Some say 2025 could be a tipping point. Either a breakthrough for Ukraine with more Western aid, or a slow grind that favors Russia's sheer size. Others fear a wider war if NATO gets pulled in deeper, or if Putin doubles down with something drastic. For now, the fighting goes on, and the world holds its breath. This isn't just a regional spat, it's a test of democracy, sovereignty, and how far humanity's willing to let this go. Thanks for sticking with me through this deep dive. What do you think? Will 2025 bring peace, escalation, or more of the same? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you found this breakdown helpful, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Until next time, stay informed, stay curious, and take care.